Hi everyone, and hi particularly to Graham, who is the first one in here tonight. And I've gone live a little bit late today, but those of you that are going to watch this later and will see this, the transcript of this, they'll see the recording of this today's thing. We're going to be talking today about meditation. So the plan is to do some of these videos as a teaching video for just small groups of people, mainly for the patrons on the website. But I've opened this up to live for public today because I don't think many people got the message earlier when I sent the email out. So so I'm going to talk a little bit about basic meditation, what it is, how you can find out about it and learn about it, and then I'll open up for questions for anybody that might want to ask about their particular practice or how they can get started, or anything you'd like to know about meditation, and any questions that might arise from what I have to say here today. So when we do meditation, most people don't really know quite what meditation is, do they? You know, it's many things to many people, and although there's only one actual state that I suppose you could call meditation, much of what is the teachings of the East that we get now have been very much sort of watered down. So, and so I want to kind of tell you some of the basic things you're likely to encounter if you're living in the West, and then try to give you a few ideas about where we can take meditation, and also a little bit about how I see it and what I do with meditation, particularly from a viewpoint of being a medium, and how meditation can be used indeed to help with the development of mediumship. So, hiya Nora, hiya Kat. Glad a few of you are joining. I expect we'll get a few more joining. Now, people, if you're watching the recording of this is a live recording. So people will be joining, and I'll be taking questions and answers a little bit later. So, okay, let's talk about the first basic things you're likely to find with the words that are sort of bandied around for meditation. Now, the one that everybody likes is the word mindfulness. And I always remember the sequence on Simpsons where Lisa Simpson is describing mindfulness. And I think it was Homer was completely foxed by it. And actually, nobody quite knew what they meant by it, including Lisa Simpson. So it's quite it's a kind of one of those words that is a modern usage. I don't think you'd find it in the original Indian traditions or the Eastern traditions. But basically, mindfulness more or less means keeping a focus on your breath. Me with my cough still. Sorry, folks. I've still got this cough from when I came back from India. But yeah, keeping a focus on your breathing. Because if we can keep our mind on the breath, we train the attention to focus on something. So a lot of the idea of the mindfulness practice is based on this breath observation. In fact, all yogic teachings in some way or another, all teachings about meditation in some way or another, use the breath as the initial focus. Because the breath is something that is portable. We can take it with us everywhere. It also is a good barometer of how we're feeling. So if we're excited, our breath will go faster. If we're relaxed, our breath will slow down. And when we sleep, our breath changes. And when we meet someone we like, our breath changes. When we under stress, our breath changes. So it's a good barometer of how our psychological state. So you can use the breath very much as the guidance into meditation. It's kind of, I see it like the boat that will take you over the river, really. I always come back to it as the key, really, to all forms of meditation that I'm going to describe. So mindfulness is the first one that people know about nowadays because it's out there as a word. It's a buzzword. It's not particularly a good word, I think. But basically, it uses the breath as your initial focus, but then also uses observation of the thoughts And mindfulness is not necessarily have to be practiced sat in meditation in a room or anything. Mindfulness is portable. Again, it can be used in any situation. So we remain mindful of what we're doing. It's kind of like being in the now and observing our thoughts, observing our emotions, and seeing everything sort of coming into our frame of our consciousness, but then just letting it pass. So thoughts come, we observe them, they go. Emotions come, we observe them, they go. The world around us appears, and we see it and we let it go. So it creates a sort of a stream of existence, and it helps us to live in a much more fluid way, I think would be the best way to describe that, and yet very attentive. So we are all the time here training the attention. So training the attention is very much part of the idea of meditation. Now, one of the other techniques that you may have heard of is Transcendental Meditation. This came into the public forum really when the Beatles went to Rishikesh in India and went and saw Maharshi Yogi. And I went to the ashram there, actually, which is now completely in ruins, and it was a very interesting place, very eerie, actually. It's very strange. But the ashram's gone. They had all these pods there where people would be able to sit in these pods, like they were like almost like beehives, where people would sit, and they have a cooker in there and everything, and they could isolate and just return into meditation. So there's an organization still, but the Rishikesh ashram's gone, but the teachings remain. And Transcendental Meditation is another easy technique. Now, all these techniques are very useful, and I'm particularly talking about meditation now because we're in a situation where many people are self-isolating, and everybody is really in one way or another, because we're not allowed out, are we, at the moment? So it's a great time to take up meditation. If you've said to yourself, oh, I've never got time to meditate, maybe for many of you now there is time and you can meditate, you know. Another technique then is this Transcendental Meditation. Now, what Transcendental Meditation does, the guru, Maharshi Yogi, would give the person a mantra, and that mantra would allegedly be personal for every person that saw him. As it happened, when people, and it was secret and nobody could share it, and then obviously people did share it, and most of them found they had very similar mantras. So the mantra can be very specific and personal to you, but you could choose a very basic, simple mantra. And I think one of the best simple mantras is simply Om Namah Shivaya, right? And just repeating Om Namah Shivaya. And you can use that mantra and internalize it. So you say it verbally, and then you say it in your mind. So it's like a song that's stuck in your head, you know, like you get a song and it's playing on your mind, it's going round and round. When you get the mantra moving, it becomes there in the background of your awareness. Right. So I'll take some questions about all this at the end. I'm just going to say a little talk first for those that are just joining, and to have some questions ready. So yeah, here we go. So basically you use the mantra as a means of focus. So again, it's training the attention. So just like with mindfulness, you train the attention to watch the breath and watch the thoughts. With Transcendental Meditation and other similar forms of meditation out there, you use the mantra as your focus. And this helps you to keep the attention focused. And that's the first step, really, of moving into the states of meditation. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the difference between focus and actual meditation in a minute too. So you've got mindfulness out there, you've got Transcendental Meditation out there. Now, a lot of people also do guided meditations, right? Now, this is kind of like, it's, again, another Western thing. But basically someone takes you on a visual journey. So you've got a person talking and you listen and you go on a journey of imagination with that person. Now, none of these actually are true meditation, but it's another focus of the thoughts, because that can help people. It happens a lot in spiritualism. We might have a guided healing meditation, for example, and take people to a beautiful garden, and they might assemble there and imagine the light and flowers and all the rest of it. And that type of imagery guided meditation can be very helpful to some people, because you've got a voice, you've got pictures to follow, you've got an instructor. And for those that have a very restless mind and find real meditation difficult, it's kind of a good way into it. It's not meditation, but it's a guided visualization, really. But it's still useful, and it's very good, certainly in public settings, because you can get everybody's attention focused all at the same time. And excuse this cough, I've still got it. I'll keep coughing. Now the other one is another one I want to tell you about is Vipassana. So Vipassana meditation the objective of that is to see things as they are. So again, it's kind of another westernized, it's using an Indian word, but it's a westernized idea. But it kind of roots back to the ideas of somebody like Ramana Maharishi, for example. He spoke about the idea of always asking yourself the question, who am I? And to keep observing ourselves and ask the question, what is true, as it were? What is real? You know, I've not quite described that right. It's like seeing things, but seeing them as they really are. So you're not actually doing anything. It's a kind of rejection of things until all you're doing is seeing it as it is, right? So every time we have a thought, we've seen the world in a little box because we've made it something that we think it should be. So we're in this thinking process all the time. So the idea with this type of meditation is to break that idea of constantly seeing things in a limited way, and to be the observer itself and be the I. Who is the I? Who is having this experience? So in essence, it works by self-observation. So you observe your reactions, you observe your thoughts, you observe your feelings. So it's very similar to the mindfulness that I spoke about before. You also observe the body. So if the body, for example, sitting in meditation, and if you're sat in cross-legged meditation, particularly, it can be sometimes very uncomfortable and the feet might go to sleep or something. So you put your attention on the pain and don't see it as pain, but see it as sensation, or see it just as it is. It's just there. So it's a kind of a technique that will help you to separate yourself from your thoughts, separate yourself from your feelings, separate yourself from pain and whatever, you know, and it gives one a certain transcendence. So it's a very powerful other form of meditation. Now, another one that's out there that you might explore, which is where I've kind of go a lot with meditation now, is it's more of a technique again, because these are all kind of techniques, and there's lots and lots and lots of techniques I could tell you, and that's why it gets very confusing for people, and I'll come back to some others later. But there's also Kriya. Now, Kriya, I think originally this originated through Yogananda's teachings of the Self-Realization Fellowship, and also through his master, who was Babaji, Mahar Avatar Babaji. And this teaching was brought down. Now, this is a technique that is much, much more difficult in that it requires a personal teacher for this technique. But basically, the basic idea is to focus on the chakras in the spinal system, which are like energy centers, and to focus on the breath and use the breath as a means to move energy up and down the spine. And it will take it up the Sushumna, which is like the middle channel of the spinal cord. And it takes it from the base of the spine to the third eye in most of the teachings. And that's quite a complicated technique that takes a long time to learn and is learned in stages. And I'll tell you a bit more about that if you want, with the questions at the end. So this is one of the other techniques you'll find is a basic technique of meditation, but it's much more deep, that one, and much closer, I feel, to going somewhere more interesting. But I see it kind of like a yoga technique, really, because what you're using is a form of what we call pranayama, which is where you control the breath. Except now you're controlling both the breath and the spiritual energy, and the spiritual energy up and down the spine. And that will take us to the ultimate states where meditation is heading. Which brings me to my final one. Well, the next from five. Actually, there's loads more I could talk about too. But so I don't want to confuse you too much. But I'm just giving an overview of what meditation is all about. So the other one I would call yoga meditation. Yoga's not the right word, but it's kind of like the meditation that's out there that's used in yoga teachings. Now, most of the decent yoga teachings, and there's many varieties, but the fundamental yogic teaching comes from Patanjali. Now, or Patanjali, I always pronounce this wrong. So Patanjali taught the Yoga Sutras, and actually, if you read the Yoga Sutras, he doesn't give any yoga postures in it whatsoever, not one. I think the only one in there is you sit, basically. And he teaches that the basic goal of yoga is what we call samadhi, which is higher consciousness, which is what we would call enlightenment. And he starts the Yoga Sutras talking about this absolute state that we are heading towards. It's a movement into the absolute stillness of being, he describes it as, when it translates into English. And he tells us how to get there through the techniques. But basically, there's two main things that take us towards it. The first one is dharana, which is focus. So sometimes people confuse meditation with this idea of dharana, which is like a form of one-pointed concentration. And watching the breath is a form of one-pointed concentration. Then there's other methods that yoga employs to help us bring to one-pointed meditation, concentration, such as gazing into a candle, and moving the light to the middle of our third eye, watching the breath, of course. A mantra is again a focus. Looking at a mandala with a dot in the middle, a yantra, those are focal techniques. Many of the internalization of listening to the internal sounds of the body are again a form of concentration. Those are all techniques that gets the mind under control so that our mind is laser focused, and then we can go into this next state, which is in Sanskrit is called dhyana, which is the meditation state. So most of the teachings you hear are more about focusing the mind so that then the mind can step into this state that is beyond thought, where we go back into the state where we're in a state of blissfulness. And that ultimate state, samadhi, has been described as being, consciousness, and bliss, those three qualities. And it has no qualities, but those are the qualities before it, as it were, because this samadhi state is beyond anything that's conceivable. But that is what meditation is a part of. It's like as we get closer to that samadhi state, we're in a state of absolute bliss and being, absolute state where thought has gone, where self has gone, small self, where personality has gone, where everything dissolves into what I would say is like it's dissolving into the absolute sea of light, absolute sea of love, and it goes beyond anything that is describable. And all these techniques, all these meditation techniques take us to that one single thing, which is that absolute state, which we are already in. We're already in that state, but we just don't realize it because we got stuck in this dualistic world. Okay, so you thought it was going to be easy, but it is quite hard to take. It's easy. The answer's easy. The absolute is easy, but there's all these thousands of paths to get to it. And I've described some of the main ones that are out there. But before I start taking your questions on this, there's one other thing that I also want to distinguish as another form of thing, which I do, right? Now, because I'm familiar with all these techniques and lots more, and I find them all very interesting. And I've practiced meditation since I was a boy, and I got really interested in yoga when before there was any illustrated books out there. I found a book in Penguin Books, Hatha Yoga, but a yoga by something Wood. It was no illustration, so I had to learn it by reading about how you do the spinal twist. Very difficult. But then it became popular, and I don't remember if any of you remember Yoga for Health with Richard Hittelman came on TV, and then it all became quite popular. But I'm also doing another form of inner work, which I would call sitting for spirit, because as a medium, I go into those states that are very close to that, what I've described of the meditation and the samadhi state, but put one's mind into a state of absolute pure stillness, and then allow other thoughts to come in that are not my own. Other thoughts that the spirit world and the spirit helpers and the spiritual teachers can influence my thoughts. And if you can get your mind into these, use these techniques to get your mind into an absolute pool of stillness, then it's like if you drop a tiniest pebble into my thoughts, it will ripple through and it will become, I become aware of it. So it's like we have to get our own thoughts out the way before we can do what we do with this mediumship and this intuitive tuning in to higher beings, if you like. So that's another, I mean, a lot of yogis might sort of say, that's a sidetrack, be careful, that's not the goal. You can get lost in that. Just as they say you can get lost in city powers, which are the spiritual powers. But I think if you do it correctly and you do it with the right heart, it's a safe method. So this is going closer to what is the other interest of mine, which is the Siddha yogis in southern India, who use the Siddhi powers to help with the enhancement of theirs and others' consciousness. So I've talked an awful lot there, and I'll take some of your questions now because I've got to cover the whole lot, right? And give you one shot at the whole lot about how I understand meditation and this focus that we call concentration of dharana and dharaya. So let's have some questions from you now. So I'm just going to look at the screen over here and see what we've got coming in. Okay, hi guys. Yeah, well, you're lots of you here. I started this off as a patrons only one actually because we were going to do that, but not many turned up. So I thought, panic! I'll put it out for public. So patrons, I'll be doing these. I want to do some of these just for you, just for the patrons. If anybody wants to join me for a development type of thing, and I can post. I can then post PDF files and audio files onto the patron site, so we can do a little bit of teaching because we all got a bit of time at the moment. So let's have some questions from you guys. Anything you'd like to know about meditation? I want to keep to this theme today about meditation and about your own personal work in meditation, or if you've ever had any interesting things you could share or questions you might have and difficulties you've had. Okay, so that's an interesting one. Have you ever managed to see distant places, astral projection? If so, what technique do you use? That's interesting. We're immediately going straight off into the city power type thing. Yes, lots and lots and lots of that. And that's something that I've also taught when I used to run Circle, because in my book, Psychic School, okay, here we go. Plug the book. I managed to plug a book on you. Yeah, in my book, Psychic School, I use the techniques in there that I describe what we used in Circle, basically, to develop mediumship in particular. And one of the techniques we used to use was kind of, when you said to see distant places, so it's kind of different to astral projection, but remote viewing. So we would use techniques that we would... well, the way I did it was I gave everybody envelopes, and I put into it pictures and a map reference, a map and a picture, but they weren't to open the envelope. And all I wrote on there was the latitude and longitude of the place. Now, all the guys sat there didn't know what the hell any latitude and longitude was, and they'd hold the envelope, and I'd have them go into a sort of imaginative journey with their imagination and let their intuition bring it out. And this also works with, it was an extension actually of psychometry, because when you hold objects and talk about things, so I extended the things we did with psychometry and then used that as a technique to see remote viewing. So I would put famous places, but I would also put rooms of people and houses of people and ask them to describe where that was and who lived there and everything. Fantastic results. I mean, they get it bang on many times, all of us in the room. They do it to me too and give me stuff, and so I get others to set it up for me. And yeah, we got some really interesting results. So so to answer your question, really it's a matter of being able to prove it. And that's why that type of technique, like remote viewing, is not something that's easy to do on your own, because you don't know if it's your own oh, this cough your own imagination. So if you're working with a group and you do something like I've described there using the envelopes, you can prove it to yourself and give yourself more confidence. And I've always found once you get confidence in what you're doing psychically, it'll all start to flow, you know, because all of us are full of self-doubt initially. Let's take another question, but thank you for that one. I could go on a whole workshop and talk about that and astral projection, which is slightly different too. Let's have another look and see what else we've got here. So bear with me, just look what you got here. Quite interesting further down. Are there any signs to show if someone is thinking about you? That's an interesting one. A kind of a bleak question. Remember, we're keeping this to the theme of meditation mainly. But certainly in meditation, I do find that you can connect with people, because it kind of follows on from that question there about the idea of remote viewing. You can kind of connect with people through meditation. Now, I've got a friend that also sits in meditation a lot, and we often go walking together, and we'd meet up on a Saturday, and we would often sometimes, well, he would do it more than me actually. He would note when he'd done his meditation, and if I had seen him or picked up on him at those particular times, right, and he was projecting to me and I would do the same back to him. And interestingly, it did correlate. You know, he said, I thought about you on such and such, and I sent this picture to you, right? This image, you know, and I said, oh, blimey, you got it. That's what I was seeing, and vice versa. So you can send, it was kind of like a telepathy type thing, but it's like that you're both sat in a deep meditation. And actually, when you do this, you're moving out of time and space in a way. So you're in a different spatial world when you're in a deep meditation. So it's much easier to connect on that spirit level, you know, spirit to spirit. And again, I used to do techniques with my circle that I used to run, in which I used to suggest to everybody that we meet up as you go to sleep at night on a certain day. So as you're going to sleep at a certain day, I would get people to trigger a dream incubation. This is another idea, but basically to tell your unconscious mind to all meet somewhere. So I'd say we would all meet at this place, and I would put an item there and see if everybody had seen it. So I put a pink teddy bear there, for example, and next time we met for circle, everybody would, I'd ask everybody to produce a written, because I had to write it down so that it couldn't just follow on from what someone else has said. Write down what they thought they seen, and they would open the envelopes, and my God, people were very, very close or bang on sometimes. So that's another kind of an interesting idea, and I do believe that in this state of meditation, which I'm kind of taking it into the psychic world now, but in these spiritually minded states, yes, we can connect, and we can also do that through dreams. So thanks for that question. That was an interesting one. Let's have a look and see what else you got here. With all respect, you don't strike me as an austere yogi. There you go. That's fine. I don't mind questions like that. No, I don't believe that austerity is necessary for a person to be a yogi. And I think it's a misused word. If you take the word yoga, it means really to yoke, to be at one with. It's kind of like the seeking the absolute state of consciousness. And I don't think it's necessary to have austerity, particularly if you're a householder, as it were. Now, I think in a different life, or even in this life, if things were different, I would be quite prepared to follow the austere route and leave the world, as it were. And I have done long, quite hard retreats when I trained to be a yoga teacher. I never actually teach the yoga. I did it just to enhance my own personal work. And I do spend long periods in meditation. And I have practiced some of the harder techniques which require tapas, as they call it, which is kind of pain, but it's focused on, like I said, it was at the beginning of this talk, it was a bit like you see it as sensation. And I've had things where you put pins in a person and things like that. I've tried all sorts of things, but you don't have to be austere, because I think that's a mistake. That's a mistake. You see, an austerity is an indulgence, just as like pleasure is an indulgence. They're both mistakes. We've got to see between both pleasure and pain. We've got to, if we're going to be enlightened beings, it's no good being an enlightened being in a cave somewhere. What good does that do to anything? Ultimately, you have to bring it back into this world. And I was a great follower of Satya Sai Baba, who I still like, and people moan about him because there's some of the stuff on the net, but I still believe he was true. And one of the things he said is we have to have our hands in society and our head in the forests. So we're in the retreat of the forest, we're doing the yogic work, but our hands are here in society. And there's nothing wrong with having many things in life. In fact, Yogananda said that he saw in the industrialists and the successful people in the world that they had the sort of willpower that would make good yogis. And he looked for people like that and said, these people make good yogis because they have the desire to see things through. And Gurdjieff, who was another great teacher who I really found an interesting person too, he was at the point that he would not allow, if people wanted a discount because they were unemployed or anything, his attitude was, well, you can't join my group because you're unemployed, because you obviously can't even get a job. So therefore, you're not good enough to start doing this work. I know I don't agree with that, but I'm just saying that's, again, another attitude towards austerity. You know, it's not because you've got something that makes, it's not a sin to be successful in this world. So that's my thought with austerity. But ultimately, there's no pockets in a shroud. And I remind myself of that, as my nan always used to say to me. So whatever comes into our life is going to go again anyway. One day I'll be dead. This will be dust. Another technique of meditation that the Buddhists use in Tibet, the idea that we meditate upon the rotting corpse, i.e. ourselves as a rotting corpse. And I think that's a hard but useful message. So thank you for that question, and that's fine for me. You can ask whatever you like. I know, okay, you're saying I'm only joking, but that's fine. I don't mind. I don't even mind people being skeptical with what I say, because that's only right. We have to question everything we do with this. Please, more on Sai Baba. What is your experience with him? Okay, that's the same person here. Okay, is it? I think anyway. That's quite okay. Yeah, well, I just come back from India, and I was there to see, not Sai Baba, because some of you might not know about him, but I went there to see Sharavana Baba, he says to me, you have discipline, you get living guru. And I think he's right, actually. If you have discipline in your life, and you do regular spiritual work, you regularly meditate and regularly do spiritual work, you do attract holy men that will help you, both in this world and in the next as well, because I know many people who have their master is dead in the spirit and will appear to them. So I went to see Sharavana Baba, which is different, but Sai Baba, Satya Sai Baba, Sharavana goes also back to the lineage of the idea of Sridi Baba as well, and his energies, he says, relates from there as well. But anyway, it's another story. I'm getting complicated here. Satya Sai Baba was, he died a little while back. I went to Puttaparthi to see him, and he was an amazing man who would materialize incredible things. I mean, I've spoken to so many people who had seen eyes-on materializations. He stood in front of me, and I was just right like that, just like you are the camera there to me here. And I saw him materialize Vibhuti ash. Right now, people said, "Oh, he was holding capsules in his hand and breaking it up to make it look like Vibhuti ash." I saw it close up. The Vibhuti ash appeared away from this. There was a gap between like a flame, like on a Bunsen burner flame. There's that gap before the flame appears. There was a gap before the Vibhuti was appearing, because I was that close to it. So it was appearing in midair, and it was not appearing dropping down. It was shooting out as well. It was kind of coming out like a cloud. And I saw it. I kind of was in a kind of a slow motion state almost when I saw this, because as it happened, it was like someone got a stick and gone crack. I actually heard a crack. And I thought to myself, I've just seen something that defies reality. And for me, it was like something snapped inside me that said, I'm now seeing the world in a completely different way. It's just like this period we're in at the moment with everything that's happening in the world. It's almost unbelievable, isn't it? It's almost, we can hardly believe it's happening, and yet it is. We talk about these things, we watch sci-fi stories, there's programs on Netflix about this sort of thing, and then the reality happens and you think, wow, it really can happen. And I saw that, and actually Sathya Sai Baba had a very, very deep influence on me. And I've spoken in my time to a lot of the main people who have had interest with him, and I've spoken to Sandvice, and I've spoken to what was the name of the lady that I was dealing with, the one that wrote about mediumship, lovely, beautiful lady. I've met some very beautiful people, and I've spoken to all the detractors. I knew them well before it happened, and all the ones that said the negative things about him. So I don't want to get involved in all that, but yeah, that's another, and I could pull techniques out of that, because that technique is even different to meditation. His teachings were one of work is worship, turn your world into meditation, and it's kind of devotional, it's kind of surrender. Okay, so that's another whole world I could talk about. I might do a whole video on that sometime. So let's have a look at some of your other questions. Right. Many. Oh, but that's an interesting question. Okay. From Jin Chen Jin, so you're obviously from China. Is there a difference in loss of self or loss of thought during meditation? Is thought a biological process during meditation? Wow, that's a great question, isn't it? And a hard one, actually. So let me answer that, because is thought a biological process? Yes and no. Now, the only reason I can say that is because I can only talk from my own personal experience with this. And I'm coming at this as the idea as a medium, because a lot of people say, a lot of teachers have said that when we die, what continues after death is kind of like an essence, and that essence will be reborn and can reoccur in different people. So it's like we spread out, that our self kind of dissolves in a way. That's one kind of teaching. But from what I understand, and it comes through being a medium all these years, is that the self continues after death. The sense of I, the sense of self, the sense of identity continues after death. And with it, the whole personality, appears to be all the thinking that a person would normally have continues, and all the memories. Now, I say this because, I don't expect all of you to have had such convincing evidence as I've had for mediumship and proof of life after death in your life. Some of you might just be starting out on this journey, and some of you might have had fantastic proofs. Some of you might, be very skeptical. But from my point of view, from everything I've done with my work as a medium and the messages that have been given to me, it is without a doubt in my mind that life continues after death. I have no doubt whatsoever about that. Now, it does continue, but it continues in the form that kind of spiritualism has talked about, in that there is a continuation of the human personality after death, and with it is thoughts and memories. So therefore, saying that, I would say that thought is not a biological process. It's not caused by the mind. So where does it come from? I think that thought comes, I think we exist on multiple levels. We exist here in this physical world. And we also exist in another physical type of world, which would be like what you could call the quantum plane. Quantum physics is being understood. And in a lot of ways, it's quite easy for the materialists to understand this because, yes, okay, perhaps things can exist in this quantum world where time is different and all the rest of it. And maybe our memories and thoughts come from there and are implanted into the brain. Maybe we think there rather than thinking here. Maybe we certainly perceive, and maybe our consciousness is outside of the brain. And although the brain lays down memories, those memories may also have some spiritual form that is in the quantum world. So so that the human body is working as an in-between. The human body is actually a medium. It's taking the consciousness from the spirit that comes through us and the experience of the world that goes back into the spirit. So what I'm saying is I feel we kind of exist outside of this plane. In meditation, I think we step back from the physical body and we step back from the physical processes and the chemical processes of the brain, and we go back to that state that is the pure consciousness of who we really are. And then we begin to see that even this physical plane and this physical body actually isn't quite what we thought it was. It could even be part of this whole existence of consciousness. When the whole lot comes together, we realize that it's all consciousness, including this world of duality and so on. And what happens to the self? Well, the whole thing with the self is another thing. It's separate to the thoughts. There's a self. And it's almost impossible to describe what the self or the I is, but we do seem to have a sense of I am, and even though I might deny it and say, I am not this, I am not that, netty, as they say, I'm not anything, I'm not the self, I'm not the thoughts, I'm not the memories, I'm not the I, but I am the I, I'm not the I, because I am, because I know I am. I can only experience it, I can't describe it, can I? I can't separate from it. But if we look at the idea of the I, of the self, we realize that it's actually, when we start to look at that, we realize that its form, it has personality, it has self, it has thoughts, it has qualities, it has karma, but at its very heart, it is the absolute state of existence that I was speaking about earlier on. That state of samadhi is actually what lies at the heart. And I went to see Sharavana Baba recently, and it was really interesting because I was having a similar conversation with my friend, and we were on the way to go and see him. And I was saying, we were saying, is Atma is Brahma, I said into him, and Brahma is Atma. So I am God and God is me, right? And when I went up to him, I handed him some sweets, and we'd been talking about this only a few minutes before. And he said to me, it's like Atma is Brahma, this sweet. Atma, a sweet on the outside, a sweet on the inside, beautiful on the outside. Just like Atma and Brahma, he said to me. So there was a really brilliant guru. He'd seen our conversation. He described it, and he found a very simple way where I handed him a sweet. There's a sweet for you. He used that And it was really interesting. And he said, here is Shiva to me. Where's Shakti? Knowing that Jane couldn't come. Yeah. So, fantastic. So, the world is not what we think it is. We work on these very deep levels sometimes. And I think the holy men, the spiritual men, Sathya Sai Baba, like I talked about there, and Sharavana Baba, they work on this level, and they don't meditate like you and me. They're already in it. They realize that everything is consciousness. It's almost as if once you realize what meditation's goal is, you can throw meditation away because you're in it all the time. It's all a meditation. So there's some thoughts for you. Let's have another look at your questions. I mustn't run on too long. No, that's not too bad. Okay. Oh, there's quite a good one. Does fasting complement meditation and help with your psychic ability? I should fast a bit more. Yeah, fasting's an interesting one. I have done some fasting. I remember doing quite a long fast for. I was on the kibbutz years ago, and there was a follower of Meir Baba, another interesting man who you could look up if you're new to all this. And he wanted us to do 3 days fast and 3 days absolute silence where we didn't speak to anybody or say anything to each other. It was a bit like this isolation we're doing all now. You cut everything off. And it was fasting was very interesting, but also doing it at the same time with no speaking, because Meir Baba stopped speaking for 3 years or more. I can't remember how long it was, but for a long time. Decided people couldn't understand him, so he suddenly decided I'm not going to speak, and it was an interesting technique to his devotees. So going without food and going without speech was quite an interesting method to try. And I did find personally, and I can only speak from my own personal experience, that it really enhanced my awareness for that period of time. My mind was very sharp. And I think when you do a fast, as long as you're medically healthy to do it, it can really help the body as well. Because, some of the studies have said that the body goes into rebuild mode when you go on a fast. So it's the cells start to regrow and start to reconnect. And even they say now that the neurons in the brain, which we always thought you had so many neurons at birth and they all start to die off. But they say that in fasting, the neurons will actually start to make more connections and start to regrow. So your brain grows. And I'm sure it would also give the body many resources to help fight illness and possibly even cancers and things. So one would have to be a bit more cautious with that. It is tough, though, fasting, I find, because in our modern society, we're always busy. And I find it quite hard. Personally, if I do a fast, it would only be for a day, and I don't do them that often now. I used to when I was younger and a bit more keen on learning it all. But I think it can help. Yes. So to answer your question, I think it is a useful thing if done sensibly. And also going straight into a full water fast is quite hard, and it might be better to have something to take the edge off it to begin with. Like, for example, I thought I did one fast using coconut water, which is quite there's a lot in that, so you could live on it quite easily, but even that I found made it easier as a good way of starting. And some people have fruit fast. So yes, I think it does help with meditation. The things we eat also do affect our thoughts. So if we're a meat eater, and I'm a meat eater, if we're a meat eater, half the time in meditation is spent getting rid of those vrittis, they call them, the little thoughts that are coming up all the time, little tiny thoughts. The restlessness of the mind is affected by what we eat with additives and with meats. So I think if a person was following a very, very meditative path in life, then I think the vegetarian diet is required. And it's easy in India. When I went to India, it was all vegetarian. It's easy. It's all paired. It's simple. But it's also, I think, for Westerners, it's a tough one, personally. Okay. People asking about predictions and things. I'm keeping to the theme of meditation here today, folks. So I'm just going to keep to the one theme. We're going to have tomorrow night Jane's going to come on with me again, and we'll do a general open questions and answers about all types of things. So if you've got anything you want to ask, it's going to be the same time at 6 o'clock, and 6 o'clock UK time. And we'll answer all, we'll get into all the unusual stuff, anything you want there. So if you want predictions and things like that, we can do all that type of thing there. Okay. Any more interesting questions? Oh, I'm going to bear with me. I'm just going to look at the scroller, see what we got here. Do you meditate every day? And if so, how long do you meditate a day? Now, that's a good question, because in our daily routine, it's quite tough, isn't it, to meditate every day? And I got interested in all of this, like I said, when I was a boy. I suppose, well, boy, nipper. I was about 13, 14 when I first started doing yoga and meditation. And everybody thought I was daft then, because nobody did it. You know, there wasn't around. But so I through my life, I have meditated, I would say, most days. There's some days I haven't meditated. So my personal routine, and I can do an easier routine than most people, because I work, this is my office. You see, over there's my computer. So, and behind me is my yoga room. So I'm nowadays set up in an absolute perfect situation. So there's no excuse. And my routine is I meditate every day. I usually do yoga at least 3 times a week in there, you know, and try to do it every day, at least something with yoga. You know, so I might do a short session of 5 minutes or something every day. And I meditate morning every day, basically. And it varies from time. Ideally, I mean, when we did the yoga, when I was doing yoga full on for a few years, and we were training, I used to drive to my friend's yoga place, and we used to meditate at 3 o'clock in the morning, which meant, well, we started at 6 o'clock in the morning. We wanted to do 3 because he used to start at dawn, basically. So it meant getting up at 3 to do the yoga, but it became totally impractical. But I did early starts at 4 o'clock-ish sort of time for a while, but not massively. So I think, and I thought after that, no, you know, I do a fantastically bright meditation at that period of time, which is called the Brahma hour. You know, the moment when dawn comes up is supposed to be the great time for meditation. Also, when the sun is high in the sky at noon, that's a possible time of meditation. And as the sun sets, and each time has a different quality to it. But the most important time to meditation, they say, is as the dawn breaks. And I found that too difficult to do, frankly. And I just now meditate in the mornings, and it will vary. The only day I don't meditate on a Sunday or a Saturday often. I might just do some mantras. I always have a mantra routine, which I do every single day. That was partly because the Nadi oracles told me this set of mantras that must be done every day after you've woken up. So I always do those. And then I might go into do my meditation. Now, how long? It varies. I think you can do 10 minutes can be enough, because if you become proficient at meditation, you will drop straight into it immediately. When you're first learning, it might take you a long time to actually even discover what that state of meditation is. You know, you're searching for it for a long time, because like I was explaining at the beginning, you use all these various techniques that I've described, which get the mind focused, and then you might get a flash of meditative state, or you might, and so it doesn't sustain at first, but gradually then it starts to sustain. And now, because I've worked all my life with it, I can just quickly drop into what I call meditation, which is kind of, you know, and it's hard to describe meditative state, because it's like you're in it, but you hardly know you're in it. You know, it's like, so you don't know how much time has passed. Sometimes you could be sat in for an hour and it seems like 5 minutes. You can be sat in for 5 minutes and it seems like hours. So, but I think the important thing is to keep it regular, to have a routine. And I would suggest mornings. If you can, do mornings and evenings. But then most people in the West don't have that amount of time. So it's easier to grab it, I find, in the morning. But work with whatever routine suits your lifestyle best, because we have to adapt it. And more importantly is to bring that meditation into your daily life. When I shut that door there, and it told me this in the Nadis as well, it says, when you shut your door to your meditation room, you are the yogi in the forest. You're the sannyasin. And I thought, yes, I am, because when I'm here, I'm completely isolated from the world. It's got no windows or anything like that. And Jane knows never to come in there and things. And so when I'm meditating, so I know I can go into as deep a state as I like. So I'm very blessed. But most of my life has been trying to snatch meditation. So I suggest a person meditates when you can. And you can grab 5 minutes, that's fine. But keep the routine up. And then other times you might be allowed 20 minutes. And every time you sit down for meditation, it is different. Sometimes you'll go straight in because your mind just happens to be in the right frame. Other times, all you've got is a load of thoughts spinning round and going round and round, and a restless mind. And you don't think you've done any meditation. But it's the act of sitting that's important, because sometimes the meditation will be deep and clear. Sometimes it won't be, but all of them are equally important because you get what you need at that time. Right, I'm going to do one more question now. So let's have a look what we got here. All right, I'm going to just ask that last one here, actually, because it's kind of a bit off topic, but it's not in another way. Because Andrea here asks, how can I get in touch with my parents who died on the 8th of May, 2017 in my home? Please help me. Because there's another thing that I do in meditation, which is what I mentioned earlier on about, that we do sitting for spirit, which is opening ourselves up into a meditative state and connecting with the spirit world, and in particular connecting with the spirit guides and the spirit helpers, and even with the guru, because the guru can also talk to you, and also with the great yogis who can simultaneously be on the earth plane and the spirit plane and so forth. But also in that quiet space that we find within, where our minds are still and our emotions are calm, then all of us can connect also with the spirit world, because you're not going to be taken over or anything. And this is far from what the yoga would teach and things like that. But I found that in that quiet space, you will sometimes feel thoughts and feelings and ideas and pictures that kind of come out of the blue. To describe how to connect with the spirit world would take me many, many more sessions to explain it. But basically, if the mind is still and the heart is quiet and we're open, then the spirit world can connect with us. If our heart is full of anguish and pain and grief, it's much, much harder, because it's a bit like I described where that still pool. When the pool is still, you throw a single pebble in and you see the ripples. If our mind is like a washing machine or a mire or a sea swirling around, you throw a stone in and nothing, there's no vibration, it's not seen. So it's only when the mind is still, and particularly the heart and the emotions are still, that the spirit world can connect with us. So to sit down with a restless mind, hoping to connect to the spirit world, will be quite a difficult thing, because that restless mind will also throw up fears and problems, and it will throw things up from the dream state and the unconscious mind, and you might get even negative feelings and fears and upsets because your mind is not still. So I would say, for those that want to connect with the spirit world, learn meditation first. Learn to let the mind be quiet. Don't go wishing and grasping and saying, oh, spirit world, you must communicate, I'm in such pain. Don't do it that way. Just expect that sooner or later it will come to you. And often the spirit world will contact you with their thoughts when your mind is, when it's quiet like that, and sometimes when it's simply distracted. I mean, you might be doing something very simple like doing the gardening or doing the washing up. Actually, Jane does all that, but all those type of things, you know, ordinary day-to-day tasks where your mind is distracted and kind of contemplative, at ease with yourself, you might just feel the presence of someone you love in the spirit, like a quiet voice, like a sense of their emotions and the feelings. You might even smell their perfume or their aftershave, something physical like that. Or you might even just feel a sudden feeling that they're close by, and a feeling of almost like a person's atmosphere. You know what I mean? The qualities of that person when they were here. It's very, very subtle. And that's why meditation is also, in its own right, it will push your spiritual development further. But it also is a tool if you want to use it in mediumship. Mediums that just throw themselves in using the unconscious empathy don't go very far with their mediumship. You have to have that quiet, still state within in order to make the communications with the spirit world. So we've kind of gone on to one of the other aspects of meditation, which I as I said, I call this really sitting for spirit or opening to spirit. You know, that's a kind of a different thing. But our minds have to be quiet, still, open, trusting, and usually once we've developed a bit too, because by the time we've got our guides there that keep us safe and things, well, they're always safe if you're on the right level. But if your mind's frantic and you just throw yourself in, you won't get good results. You'll get the results once you find the inner peace. So that is not the goal of meditation. The goal of meditation is this state called samadhi that I talked about, that Patanjali talks about. It's realizing what really is. It's being able to see things as they are, unsullied. As Aldous Huxley described it when he took mescaline. He said he looked at the world as pure naked existence, you know, and in a way that also is what meditation is. It's like seeing things in their purest, cleanest, perfect state, not just seeing the world like that, but understanding it from that we are that, you know. So that's the goal, and some of those other things are about mediumship there. So I'm going to conclude now, and I'm going to say thank you to you all for joining me tonight. I do want to do some of these just for the patrons on the site. So if you're a patron and watching this today, do keep an eye open. And I'd like to do, but I went public today with this one because it was, I felt I needed enough people to make it work. So turn up early if we want to do a patron one, and I'll announce those on the patron site. And of course, we'll be doing these public ones as well. And I hope to do some, like I say, I hope on the patrons part of the site to start doing some proper teachings where I can start teaching you general spiritual opening, not just the Eastern techniques, which you know I'm interested in, but the spiritualist techniques and methods for attuning to the spirit world as well. So thanks all, and thank you for all your comments, and thanks for joining me. See you again. Don't forget, follow this channel if you're new to it. And if you're interested, actually, my book, Psychic School, is a good one for those of you that are interested in some of those things I've talked about at the circle there tonight, and how the things we did. But also, we're hoping to, this is kind of a little bit of experiment, these live streams. We're going to start, we're hoping once all this virus thing's out of the way, we're going to have our own place, this cyber kind of online temple that we want to set up. And we'll be doing some live type of readings type of thing. Well, not readings. I hate all these mediums that go pulling cards out doing readings online. I find that so shallow. We're going to do a sort of seance type, I suppose that's bad too, a seance room type of thing, in which I'll be doing mediumship, and I'm going to bring in some other mediums, and we'll do a full seance and have some guests. And some of those guests will be selected from the patrons. Patrons are eligible to come to that. And also I'll be bringing some people in, and we'll try to connect to those that are watching us live at the same time and see if we can get some spirit messages for you too. So that will be, I think, very interesting, because it will be, I think, something that's never really been done properly before, and you'll be able to see mediumship hopefully at its best. Okay, thanks for joining us. See you soon. Bye for now, folks.